Ako ay Pilipino, ang dugo'y maharlika. Likas sa aking puso at hikain kay kanda.
Jinsho. China claims Jinsho as its southernmost border. Jinsho is a fully submerged area, 22 meters below the surface of the water, 950 nautical miles from Hainan, 400 nautical miles from Ituaba, fully submerged, just 80 kilometers from the coast of Bintulu, Sarawak, within the EEZ of Malaysia, and China says this is our southernmost border. Below the surface of the water, very far. You know, under UNCLOS, you can claim a maximum of 350 nautical miles from your coastline. 12 nautical mile territorial sea, based from your coastline. 200 nautical mile territorial EEZ, based from your coastline. Plus an additional 150 nautical miles extended continental shelf from the outer limit of your EEZ, if you can prove a natural prolongation of their continental shelf, or a total of 350 nautical miles. Beyond that, you cannot claim anything. China is claiming way beyond what is allowed under UNCLOS. Now, every year since the last 3 years, China has been sending a naval task force to Jinsho. And this naval task force, they perform an oath-swearing ceremony where the sailors take an oath to pledge to defend with their lives the southernmost border of China. Now, they will be doing this along its 9 dot lines close to our territory. In Malabak, Lampaya, Burgos, they'll be doing that soon once they finish their air and naval bases in the countries. That's how I assess it. The National Security Advisor of Malaysia, Kasim, posted this in his Facebook. Lupunya shows, and he said, Lupunya shows is just 54 nautical miles from Sarawak. This small island is not a disputed territory, but foreign ship which came here as included in international waters. Turns out that since April 2013, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel has anchored on the Lupunya shows and has remained there up to now. For more than 2 years now. That's the vessel. Since April 2013, it has stayed there, and the Malaysians have monitored it. They have a ship about a kilometer away just monitoring it. But Malaysia kept quiet, did not protest, did not tell the world that there was an intrusion. Remember, November 2012, we finally learned that China told the Philippines that their Coast Guard vessels in Scarborough Shoal will stay there permanently. They will not move anymore. November 2012. 6 months later, April 2013, China did the same thing to Malaysia on Lupunya shoals. But Malaysians responded differently. What we did, we filed a case. Malaysia kept quiet. Malaysia is an poster child of a nice guy to China. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil against China. Hoping that China will withdraw the vessel. It never left. It stayed there. And the Chinese are saying, well, the Malaysians didn't protest, so they waive whatever right they have. They concede to us this territory. What is Lupunya shows is about 100 square miles in area, rich in fish and rich in oil and gas. So one day, I anticipate China will put up an air and naval base there. So it doesn't pay to play nice to China, because as you will see later, there is a grand design by China. No matter what we do, they will stick to their grand design. China continues to mass produce warships at a faster rate than any country in the world during peacetime. According to the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence, during 2014 alone, more than 60 naval ships and craft were laid down, launched, or commissioned, with a similar number expected to the end of 2015. Those are the latest guided missile destroyers of China. This was launched last year. This will be launched this year, and 5 more are under construction simultaneously. With the vertical launching cells, Missiles can be launched vertically, and they're very powerful. That's the Chinese frigate, newly commissioned last January 2015. China's 15 of these. China plans 5 more. That's the corvette of China. China's 25 of these now. China plans a total of 40. According to the Chinese, just 20 of these can control the South China Sea. That's the nuclear-powered attack submarine of China. They just completed 3. They will be commissioning this soon. China is the largest conventional submarine force in the world, about 60 boats. That's the first aircraft carrier of China, the Liaoning. China plans a total of 4. 1 is now under construction. That's the supply ship of China. It has a helipad and a storage for a heavy lift helicopter. This is ideal for supplying their garrisons in the Straits. That's the biggest supply ship of China that has gone to the Gulf of Aden, and also to the Mediterranean, where the Chinese have conducted naval exercises with Russia. That's China's amphibious transport dock. This will be used in the Straits. It can carry 80 Marines with 15 to 20 amphibious armored vehicles. This was seen in the satellite photos in Mischief. China has the second navy. Their second navy is their Coast Guard. And their Coast Guard is the largest Coast Guard in the world, larger than the combined Coast Guard of Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines combined. That is the biggest Coast Guard vessel in the world, 10,000 tons. There's a sister ship, another 10,000 tons under construction. So what will China do with all of these naval assets? Only one thing: to enforce the 9 dash lines. Under China's military strategy, which they released just a month ago, China will shift from offshore water defense to open seas protection. In fact, they state the traditional mentality that land outweighs the sea must be abandoned, and great importance is to be attached to managing the seas and oceans and protecting maritime rights and interests. That's the code word for enforcing the 9 dash lines. They will enforce the 9 dash lines. They have the capability now. What are the maritime zones under UNCLOS? That's the territorial sea, 12 nautical miles measuring from the baseline. That's the low water mark. And then from there, you have the EEZ, measured from here, it's 200. And then, if you can prove a natural prolongation of your continental shelf, you are entitled to an additional 150 nautical mile extended continental shelf. But your rights are only to the minerals, oil, gas, and the minerals. The high seas here starts at the edge of the EEZ. The high seas belong to mankind. All the fish in the high seas belong to mankind. And all states, coastal and landlocked, can fish here. This is the area. This is the common heritage of mankind. If you want to explore here, you have to get a permit from the International Seabed Authority. And as of now, the International Seabed Authority has issued 27 exploration permits. The highest number went to China with 4 exploration permits, because China now has the technology to explore the seabed. That's why I doubt if China will ever withdraw from the UNCLOS, because then they cannot mine the seabed anymore. And they need a permit from the International Seabed Authority. That's the problem of the U.S. They have not ratified UNCLOS. So what the U.S. is doing right now is to ask their subsidiaries in UK, the subsidiary of GE, for example, in UK or Canada will apply as a Canadian or a UK company. And they are allowed. But one thing that they cannot do is to claim an extended continental shelf. You see, the Arctic is now warming, and countries bordering the Arctic are claiming extended continental shelf. But the claim has to be made by the state itself. To make that claim, you must be a member of UNCLOS, and that's the problem of the U.S., we cannot make a claim. Now, there is an important concept in our dispute with China, which is the low tide elevation. A low tide elevation is a naturally formed area of land. It may be a rock, reef, outer or sandbar, surrounded by water, above water at low tide, but submerged at high tide. So at low tide, you see it. At high tide, it's completely underwater. That's a low tide elevation. Now, a low tide elevation is part of the submerged continental shelf. It is not land. It is not territory. It has no territorial sea. It has no territorial airspace. It cannot generate an EEZ or a continental shelf. A territorial, an LTE beyond the territorial sea is not subject to appropriation. Cannot be owned by any state. So that's the example of low tide elevation. This is a low tide elevation because at high tide, it's completely submerged. This one is a high tide feature. It is entitled to a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. This one is entitled to 12 nautical mile territorial sea, but if this is capable of human habitation of its own, it's entitled to 200 nautical mile EEZ. Those are the concepts which we will be going back later. What is the Philippine arbitration case? It is solely a maritime dispute. It is not a territorial dispute. And the most important issue we raised is this, whether China's land lines can encroach on the 200 nautical mile EEZ of Philippines. Whether the waters enclosed by the land lines can prevail over our EEZ because there is an overlap. That's the number one. If we win that issue, then the area of dispute will be reduced drastically to the islands in the Straits in the 12-mile territorial sea. That kind of dispute we can manage. We can live with that for the next 100,000 years. But if China claims 85.7% of China's sea, we cannot live with that because we fish there every day. We get our gas there. We traverse that area every day. The second issue we raise is whether certain geologic features like Mischief Reef, Second Thomas Shoal, that's a human shoal, Johnson South may fall within our EEZ, our low tide elevations. If they are low tide elevations, they form part of our submerged continental shelf, and therefore we have jurisdiction over these low tide elevations. Another issue we raised is whether Subi Reef, which is outside our EEZ but within our continental shelf, whether this is just a low tide elevation. Our position is that it is a low tide elevation, and therefore it generates no maritime entitlement. And as the coastal state, we have the sole right to reclaim that area. Another issue we raised is whether Cable Reef, Makinan Reef, which are low tide elevations, but within the 12 nautical mile of two islands, Namib and Sincao, whether they should be part of Sincao and Namib because they are within the territorial sea. Whether certain geologic features like Fiery Cross Reef and Quarter Reef outside of our EEZ but within our continental shelf are just rocks above water at high tide, therefore entitled only to 12 nautical mile and not 200. China is claiming 200. To claim 200, the island must be capable of human habitation of its own. There must first be water, but water is not enough. You must have enough land to grow food. Fifth issue we raise is whether CARPIO show whatever state owns it, whether China's sovereignty over it or the Philippines, whether it's only entitled to 12 nautical miles or 200 nautical miles. China is saying it's entitled to 200 nautical miles. Now, we are not asking the tribunal to rule what state has sovereignty, what state has ownership over these islands and rocks. We are only asking the tribunal to rule what is the extent of the maritime entitlement, 0 nautical miles, 12 or 200. All these are maritime disputes. But China is saying, oh, before you can determine the maritime dispute, you must first determine who has sovereignty over those rocks or geologic features. That's the position of China. You must first determine sovereignty before you can determine maritime entitlement. How do we respond to that? Well, we show Scarborough Shoal. This is above water at high tide, 1.2 meters above high tide. Now, you know when you look at this, that this one cannot sustain economic human habitation of its own. This, no, not a single single blade of grass grows here. You cannot squeeze a single drop of fresh water from these rocks. Not a single human being can live here. So it's just a rock. Should you only be entitled to 12 nautical miles? Now, do you have to know who has sovereignty over this to conclude that this can only generate 12 nautical miles? It cannot generate 200. That's what we're saying. You don't have to determine who has sovereignty over this for the court to rule that it is only entitled to 12 nautical miles. Another example, this is Mischief Reef. Mischief Reef is fully submerged at high tide. It's a low tide elevation. Now, it is beyond the territorial sea of any state. It is within our EEZs. Now, under international law, a low tide elevation beyond the territorial sea is not capable of sovereign appropriation. It cannot be owned by any state. It can be subjected to sovereignty. So we are telling the tribunal, you cannot determine the sovereignty of this because, first of all, there is no sovereign. There can be no sovereign over an entity beyond the territorial sea. But we can determine the maritime entitlement. Since it is fully submerged at high tide, then it's not entitled to even a 12 nautical mile territory. So you can really separate sovereignty from maritime entitlement. Another thing, this is the 9 dash line. As you know, the principle in UNCLOS in the law of the seas, land dominates the sea. This means that you must have land to have a territorial sea. You must have land to have an EEZ. You must have land to have an extended contribution. Land is essential. It's necessary and essential before you can claim any maritime zone. That's why China is saying, because of that principle, you must first determine what's sovereignty over the land. But we're saying, look at the 9 dash lines. These lines are not based on land. It's just a drawing in the middle of the sea. 950 nautical miles from Hainan, here. It's not based on land. There is no reason or rhyme in drawing this. It's just a drawing to get the most of the sea. So it's not based on land. China cannot prove it's based on land because different configurations. So that principle that land dominates the sea cannot apply to the 9 dash lines because their lines are measured from land. They are not based from land. What applies to China, the 9 dash lines, is absence of land dominates the sea. If you don't have land, you cannot claim the sea. That's what applies to them. Since their 9 dash lines are not based on land, it cannot be used to claim the sea. That's how we explained it. Now, China's reclamations, China occupies 7 reefs in its practice. They're claiming all 7 reefs, but China is also getting filling materials from 10 other reefs and to put these filling materials in the 7 reefs that it is reclaiming. So China is dredging a total of 70 reefs. That's a lot. Now, China explained that the primary purpose of these activities is civilian. To improve the working and living conditions of personnel, to better fulfill our international obligations concerning maritime search and rescue, disaster prevention and mitigation, to enable China to provide better services to vessels from China, her neighbors, and other countries taking the South China. In other words, China is saying, we're doing this for the Philippines. We tell them, no thank you, please don't do it. China, however, is saying that, of course, these are civilian facilities, but they have to be defended against pirates, raiders, so we will put military facilities there. It's like what China told us when they occupied Mischief Reef in 1995. They said, oh, it's just a fisherman's shelter, you can even shelter your fishermen there. Well, it turned out that shelter turned out to be a military garrison, and China is now reclaiming Mischief Reef, turning it into at least 500-hectare military facility. Let's go to the actual reclamations. Let's find across Reef before the reclamation. It's 1 meter above water high tide, just outside our EEZ but within our continental shelf. How does it look after we started? This is now, well, when China started the reclamation, they came out with this photo in the website of China State Shipping Corporation. That's a company that's doing the dredging. And they explain that this is the purpose of the reclamation. Look at this. This is a strategic bomber of China that's swept clean. These are hangars for fighter jets. This is the runway. And these are the windmills to generate electricity. So they plan an airbase. And this is the harbor for the warships. This is a 3,000-meter runway, 3 kilometers. It can take any military aircraft from China. China said that they will reclaim 200 hectares. After the reclamation, I think they exceeded a little. This is more than 200 hectares. This is bigger than Diego Garcia Island, the naval base of the U.S. in the Indian Ocean. Diego Garcia is only 100 hectares. Now, this is the photo that China released when China said they have completed the reclamation in Fiery Cross Reef. There's a 3-kilometer runway, there's the harbor for the warships. So it's exactly how they planned it. Now, Admiral Harry Harris, the new commander of the U.S. Pacific Command, stated the other day that a 10,000 foot, that's 3-kilometer runway, is large enough to take a B-52, almost large enough for a space shuttle, and 3,000 feet longer than you need to take off on a 747. It's huge. Next slide, look at that. This is the plan, and this is the actual reclamation that's been completed. Now, what will China put there? China manufactures this fighter jet locally. It's a copy of the Russian Sukhoi 30. They'll probably put it there. These have the range of 3,900 kilometers. The combat range can cover the entire Philippines, their Borneo, and the Natuna Islands. And they will probably put up this. This is the swept-wing strategic bomber of China that you saw there in that photo uploaded in the website of the dredging company. This is the H-6K bomber. It has a range of 7,000 kilometers. It carries 6 cruise missiles, conventionally armed or nuclear armed. The cruise missiles have a range of 2,200 kilometers. So this plane can fly from Fiery Cross Reef towards Australia, and 1,000 kilometers before reaching Australia, it can release its cruise missiles, conventionally armed or nuclear armed, and turn back. The cruise missiles are satellite guided, and they can hit all U.S. military facilities in northern Australia. They have never done this. They cannot do it now, but they can do this with that Fiery Cross Reef runway. That's Johnson South Reef before the reclamation. It's a low tide elevation within the Philippines EEZ. That's how it looked, June 19, just recently. It has buildings, 4 to 5 stories. Now this was seized by China from the Communist Vietnamese in 1988. 7 Vietnamese soldiers died in that battle. That's McKinnon Reef before the reclamation within our EEZ. A low tide elevation, that's how it looked, May 5. Look at the buildings. It could be the Command and Control Center for the Maritime Silk Road. That's McKinnon Reef again, May 28. That's Gavin Reef. Gavin Reef is outside our EEZ but within our continental shelf. That's the construction there. Tall building again. Gavin Reef, that's of May 28. That's Quarteron Reef before the reclamation. That's how it looked, May 7. Tall buildings again. Now, this guy, Victor Robert Lee, that's a pseudonym, he's probably a CIA guy. He came out with this, and he studied all these buildings. And he noticed that all these buildings have a ramp from the ground to the 2nd or 3rd floor. And he said the purpose of this ramp is to bring in a mobile artillery or a mobile missile battery to hide it. Bring it up to the 2nd or 3rd floor. If there's a storm surge, you bring it up. So this will be a military facility if that's the case. Subi Reef, before the reclamation, Subi Reef is a low tide elevation outside our EEZ but within our continental shelf. So it cannot be owned by anybody. That's the reclamation as of July 18. Subibit, it's in the high seas. Article 88 of UNCLOS says the high seas shall be reserved for peaceful purposes. China is building this air base and naval base. Look at this. This is a clear pathway for the ship. So the ships will enter here, and we have a safe harbor here. This is the runway, and this is huge. This area is huge. So China will came all the way here and here, and this is the entry and exit of the harbor. It has a harbor for warships and a runway. It could even be a harbor for their submarines, because they are in Hainan, which is their current submarine base. The waters are shallow. The waters here are very deep. That's M.I.S.M.O reef before the reclamation. This is a very critical reef for us. It's only 125 nautical miles from Palawan. It's almost midway between Palawan and the Swathes. So if the Chinese control this, we'll have a problem resupplying our troops in Pag-asa, in the other islands. M.I.S.M.O reef before the reclamation on March 16. If China will end the reclamation, it will take all this area. It's about 500 hectares, my calculation. Calculation of the UNCLOS Center is about 750 hectares. Some are saying they will reclaim the entire lagoon, more than 1,000 hectares. Honolulu City is just 400 hectares, so 500 hectares is bigger than Honolulu City. You can have a runway, you can have a naval base, you can garrison thousands of troops there, right between Palawan and the Swathes. And this is the biggest worry of our naval commanders, but how will we supply our troops there? This is only 20 nautical miles from a Mayumi show. And they finish their air and naval base here. I don't see how we can hold on to Mayumi show. 24 hours a day, they will be there. Right now, they have big ships circling around the Mayumi show. They cannot go near because their ships cannot sail through the shallow waters. But if they have a base there, they have small ships and just go near the BRP Sierra Madre. That's M.I.S.M.O reef as of June 19, the most recent photo that we have. Look at all the vessels, the dredging vessels here. So that's M.I.S.M.O reef midway between Palawan and the Swathes here. That's M.I.S.M.O reef. Ayungin Shoal is just here. 104, 105 nautical miles from Palawan. Now, China has an air base in Budi Island. Budi Island is in the Paracels, and this is the air base. It has 2,700 meter runway. They're extending this to 3,000 meters, about 3 kilometers. So this is good enough to take in any of their military aircraft. The Budi Island is the largest island in the Paracels, 230 hectares. Now, so China actually one air base in the Paracels now. They are putting up 2 in the Swathes. I anticipate they will put up an air base, naval base in Scarborough. Why? Because they need a triangle of air bases to enforce an ADIZ, Air Defense ID zone in the South China Sea, and they have to guard the Pasig Channel. Their submarines are based here, or maybe here later on. To get out to the deep Pacific, they have to cross the Pasig Channel. That's their only outlet. Why do they have to cross the Pasig Channel? Because their missiles that are nuclear armed can reach only 7,500 kilometer range. And they have to go to the mid-Pacific for that. Maybe 10 years from now, they can lengthen the range of their missiles. They can fire it from the South China Sea, but right now they cannot do it. What happened from 1946 to 2015 in the South China Sea? Before the war, the southernmost defense perimeter of China was Hainan. China did not occupy any island in the South China Sea other than in Hainan. During the war, the Japanese controlled the Paracels, and after the war, 1946, the Japanese left, and China seized the Amphibite group of the Paracels. There are 2 groups, the Amphibite and the second group, the Paracels. This was seized by the French and later on succeeded by the Vietnamese. In 1974, towards the end of the Vietnam War, the Chinese evicted forcibly the South Vietnamese. So China moved its southernmost defense perimeter southward again. In 1988, China evicted the Communist Vietnamese in Johnson South Fleet. 77 Vietnamese sailors died. So China moved very far its southernmost defense perimeter. 1995, China seized Mississippi from the Philippines, getting very close to the 9-dash line. 2012, China seized Scarborough from the Philippines, close to the 9-dash line. 2013, China seized Vicuña Shoals from Malaysia. I think eventually China will put up a near naval base also on Vicuña Shoals. So, what is the grand design of China? They have been moving their defense perimeter southward towards the south, the 9-dash line, because they consider the 9-dash line as their national boundary. So the grand design of China is to control the South China Sea for economic, military purposes. Economic and military purposes, China wants all the fisheries, oil, gas, and mineral resources within the 9-dash line. China has the largest fishing fleet in the world with 70,000 boats. China's per capita fish consumption is the highest in the world, at 35.1 kilograms per year, while the rest of Asia is only 21.6 kilograms per year. China is the largest net importer of petroleum in the world. The economy will grind to a halt if they cannot import. So they have to have a supply of petroleum. China also wants the South China Sea as a sanctuary for its nuclear-armed submarines, free from the surveillance for U.S. submarine hunting Poseidons or U.S. nuclear attack submarines. Why? Because there are only 2 countries in the world now that have a second strike capability. If the U.S. suddenly attacks the land-based ICBMs of Russia, wipes them out, Russia can still retaliate with their nuclear-armed submarines in the Sea of Oshkosh, the sea that is enclosed by the Kurils. So there is a second strike capability by China, and the U.S. Poseidons cannot go to the Sea of Oshkosh because that is Soviet waters. China has no second strike capability because all their submarines in the South China Sea are shadowed by the Poseidons. Submarine hunting airplanes, they can detect all the Chinese submarines and drop torpedoes. So China wants the second strike capability to be a